with Joe Van Doren. It's put on by the Corporate Training Group. It's a free webinar. We're a group that works within the community with the businesses, and we have a lot of training opportunities available for you if you are interested in those.
So are we good? Nancy, should we go ahead and get started?
I think we should.
Okay, good. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I am Joe Van Doren, and I'm very excited to be with you this afternoon just to share some thoughts on anger management in family life, especially given all the circumstances that we all find ourselves in today. And schools are, closed now for the entire year, and parents are taking on the roles of teachers. They're taking on their normal roles of working and all their household stuff and their other responsibilities, and it can really be a bit much. When I was first asked to do this, I was a little bit overwhelmed because typically this is a 6-hour class one-on-one, and honestly, it could be a whole semester. But at any rate, I was a little bit worried about, okay, what do we talk about and how do we do this? So I did what most people would do. I went to social media and asked a whole bunch of my friends, what do you think? What should be talked about? And they gave me a bunch of questions that they thought would be interesting. So we're going to cover some of those today, and and hopefully that in our time together that you'll be able to find a few good usable ideas that you can use for yourself and for your family. So for those that know me, you know that I'm very much interested in the virtues of all of us and bringing out the best in each one of us. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to share with you a virtues pick. So let me get to the right screen. Let me see if I can do that. There we go.
You're there.
Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is from the Virtues Project, and these are their family cards. And the virtue that I picked for today was detachment. And I'm going to read the definition, and after I read it, if anyone wants to put a comment in how that resonates with you, I'd be interested in seeing that. Detachment is experiencing your feelings without allowing your feelings to control you. It is choosing how you will act in a situation rather than just reacting. With detachment, you are free to do what you really want and choose to do. Detachment is a way to use thinking and feeling together so that you don't let your feelings run away with you. Wow. That's really something, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if I had to choose one virtue, this is the one virtue that is the hardest for parents because we're so emotionally attached to our kids. And it certainly describes the managing of anger just about perfectly. And so let's see, did anyone have any thoughts about that you'd like to share? So maybe you're just letting that sink in a little bit. It really is a good.
I think the thing to remember though is you have to, when you're detaching, you have to be careful that you don't completely turn it into an unhealthy thing.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and there is there's a balance there as there is with all virtues, isn't it? So. What is anger? That's a good place to start, I think. And so we've defined it here as a core normal emotional reaction having a goal blocked. And so it's, anytime we have any kind of a goal, whether it's an emotional, physical, or social one, if it's the way we wanted someone to behave or the way we wanted someone to feel about us or treat us, and that goal is blocked, there's a reaction to that. And so anger is that core emotion, but there's a whole family of negative emotions that are around that. And I'm wondering if we can just think about that for a minute, because we would call them feeling words, I would say. And feeling words are, the the family of emotions that go around, or the family of feelings that go around anger. So for instance, we might say irritated is a form of anger, but on a scale of 1 to 10, it's pretty low. But rage would be like a 10, right? It would be over the top kind of thing, and kind of the bigger one. So take a few minutes and list in the chat box, if you can, some words that you think of that are related to anger, and then beside the word, write in, put a number, a 1, a 5, or a 10, that will describe whether it's a low level anger, medium grade, or a high grade anger. Let's see what kind of words we come up with here.
We have 5s, we have 1, we have 7, we have
Yeah,
10.
good words: annoyed, resentment, yeah, frustrated, that's a
Frustrated,
good, yeah.
upset, furious, yelling,
Pissed might be a metaphor, right?
right? Hot, blow up, disappointment,
Yeah,
sad, raged,
yeah,
angry,
good,
fighting,
yeah,
explode, yelling,
yeah. So,
regret,
so we have all
misunderstood.
kinds here that we see. Wow. And so there's all kinds of words that really fit into that. Some of the ones that I didn't see in there were things like, oh, I don't know, spiteful or hostile, right? Exasperated, disappointed. I don't think I saw disappointed. So there's all kinds of words like that. There's also metaphors that we use, right? So someone had the word pissed in there, but there's other metaphors that we use: fit to be tied, blowing their stack. Can you guys think of any of those?
Hot under the collar,
Yes,
resentful,
yes. On fire, yes. Wow. Seething, oh, that's a good one. Thank you. Hopping mad,
mad.
yes. Yeah, very good, very good. So why do we do an activity like this? Because it really gives us the opportunity to recognize that there are gradations in anger. It shows that anger is not a all or nothing kind of thing, right? So there's things that are low level that we begin to see, and then there's much higher level anger too. It also helps us develop a vocabulary so that instead of just saying, oh, I'm so mad or I'm so angry or whatever, we can actually describe exactly what we are. We're frustrated, we're disappointed, we're annoyed, whatever the word might be that might fit that. And then finally, when we look at some of the metaphors and behaviors, we can scale those on a 1 to 10 also. And sometimes it's those things that actually reflect the authentic feelings that we have. So when we think about this, there's, let's see, before I go to that, let's hold off on that one just for a second. So sometimes anger is triggered by other emotions beneath it too. The most common of those is fear. So just for a minute, just make a few notes about what is it that we can be afraid of, or what other emotions might even be involved that are actually at the base or at the foundation of some of the anger that we see. So I've mentioned fear. So fear of what? Yes, afraid of failure, without a doubt. Yes, yes.
The unknown.
The fear of the unknown, yes. And anxiety can make you angry. Yep. Conflict with yourself, I like that. Yeah, jealousy, good. Yeah. So there's many, aren't there? So,
Yes.
and even other emotions that some of them not mentioned there: fear of failing, without a doubt, and especially in regard to family and to raising children. Many times we hear parents say, you know, afraid that they're not good enough. I don't know if anyone's heard that before, but it's certainly something that I've heard. Some of the other emotions that might be involved there, I see self-doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Stress, right? Frustrations, disappointment, resentment, all of those things are additional emotions and things that come up. And one that really surprises, well, it doesn't surprise me, but it is of interest is things like embarrassment, right? And sometimes we forget that sadness or grief or conflict can also be an emotion that's wrapped around the feelings of anger. So the thing is that the one thing that we want as we begin this process today is understanding that anger is a choice. No one makes us angry. And it's very interesting because with all the challenges in the world, with all the things that we have, it's not the other things that make us angry. And here's an example of how we know that that's true. How many of you have ever been stopped by a police officer when you think that they stopped you unnecessarily and maybe felt a little bit of that anger, right? Or, but when they came up to the car, I am sure that you were pretty nice to them, right? So we can control that in the situation. Or maybe we've had a boss or something that did something that really made us angry, but because we wanted to keep our job, we controlled that anger. So anger is really a choice. You know, in the Marines, they have a program for the Marines on anger management and family. And one of the first things that they do is dispel the myth of my wife makes me angry. So, you know, they get rid of that thought right away. And I know that this is so true because, you know, I didn't start this off this way, but I just want everyone to know that this isn't, I so much appreciate being able to share some of these things with you because anger is something that I dealt with for many years. And what I found that was when I got help to try to understand where the triggers were coming from and what was the basis of it all, what I found out was once I understood that I now had a choice. I could choose between acting and continuing to act in a disturbed manner, or I could stay and make a choice to be more peaceful. And it was really about hitting those crossroads and making that choice. And so that's what we're going to talk about today in a number of ways. So why does anger arise? There's 4 primary reasons. I've listed them here. There's about 9 other kind of secondary factors also. But I think the one I want to emphasize the most is this first one, that we care. You know, the caring that we have is that we care about either protecting ourselves or our others, or we're trying to, you know, if it's in regard to our children, we care about how they're going to be, if they're going to be successful, if they're going to be happy. And that caring is really a very deep reason for much of what we reflect when we are angry. It can also arise from a desire to protect other people and to, or maybe a cause or a principle that we're standing up for. It might be justice that we're standing up for. And because if we didn't care, then we wouldn't continue to react, right? And so while caring is a wholesome quality, it's also one that we want to maintain that, but we also want to balance it too, so that we don't care so much that it comes out this way, but in an angry way. So, but certainly these other things are very important too, the self-diminishment, the feeling that we're rejected, because all of us want to belong. We want to be a part of something, including our children. and we might have felt a loss of power somewhere along the line, and we want to restore that. That can be a major factor. And sometimes it's about unrealistic expectations. And certainly, I think when we're dealing with children especially, that's a very true thing. I was thinking about a situation I had in a class that I was teaching with multiple ages, and I had this young girl in the class that just wasn't doing very well. And I didn't understand why. And I went to the administrators, tried to see if there was any backstory or back issues that I needed to know about. And what we found out was that there was nothing more than she was 7 years old. She was 7 years old and she was all the way up to my shoulder. And so I had an expectation because I thought she was older than she really was. And my expectation was unrealistic for her behavior. And so that was a real learning lesson for me, not to be frustrated until I found out the whole story. So that was just a little private story of mine. So there's a lot of different ways that anger is expressed, and we'll just go through these because we really want to get to the core of this, of how to manage this anger. But obviously we're very aware of aggressive and passive aggressive, and assertive, being assertive in the way we handle it. So I thought we'd just do something. I've put up on the screen some of the ways that we can tell if it's aggressive, passive, passive aggressive, but I'm going to name something and see if you can identify it with the way that the anger is being expressed. So let's use this one. Using a calm, even tone of voice. Which one is that? Let's just type that in.
Passive.
Yes, assertive. Very good. That's exactly right. How about this one? Cursing. Aggressive. Yes, everybody's got that. Excellent. How about getting revenge in a secret way? Yes, very good. Passive aggressive. Yes, very good. Now this might be the hardest one, and this is the one that was probably the most surprising to me. Sarcasm. Passive aggressive. Yes, very good. I will tell you, when I first learned of that, I had to really check myself, because sometimes we see ourselves using, or I do anyway, see ourselves using sarcasm. And so it's just a reminder to us that, you know, maybe you should check and see what it is that you're a little bit upset about. So one final thing here that one more thing that I want to look at is this idea of that anger, I should get rid of all my anger. And honestly, anger can have pros and cons. So there's two different types of anger, a disturbed anger and a non-disturbed anger. And the non-disturbed anger is certainly, can serve a good purpose. But the disturbed anger is the one that's out of control and that is disproportionate to others, and is really meant to hurt. So, but non-disturbed anger has a purpose, and generally it's about bringing a change for good, and it's more measured and controlled, and it's done in a respectful way. It's not meant to hurt other people. And so, you know, we should never discount the power that anger can have to move us to do something good, and still be careful that it's not something that's out of control, or that we're using in a more in a way that actually hurts, punishes, humiliates, blames, shames, does all those other things that's possible for it to do. And because when it comes to that, in the questions that I was asked on social media about this, one of the questions that came up was about, you know, when is anger, you know, the comparing anger and abuse. And if we're having a disturbed anger, if that's what we're dealing with, or if that's what we're behaving in that way, that is abuse. that's the abuse side. There's certainly not enough time today to go into that. And if anyone wants any resources on that, I have some that I would be more than happy to share with others. So this brings us to this thought about triggers. So some people, when they're angry, it's something that builds up inside of them and then all of a sudden explodes out. And for some people, it's something that happens really quickly. Either case, it's much of it is done with what we call triggers or hooks. So what is it that that triggers us? Well, I've listed 4 things there. The first one is others. And so when other people hurt us or they don't do what we expected them to do, that can sometimes, or it can be a trigger for us. The second one is situations. So situations could be anything from like traffic jams, getting lost, the computer not working for us, losing something, being frustrated in some fashion, or seeing an injustice that we just don't want to deal with, and that could be a situation. This third one is self. I think this is an interesting one because that fear of disappointing ourselves, the fear of not meeting a personal goal, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, the fear of not being good enough, smart enough, you know, tall enough. I don't know. There's so many of them. And so anger can really ensue from just not acknowledging realistic limitations for ourselves. And then finally, a combination of all of those. So we see this happen, right? The combination. Someone at work does something to us that kind of disappoints us. And then we get into a traffic jam coming home and we're upset with ourselves because we didn't get to our child's play on time. But then we find ourselves taking it out on someone else that doesn't have anything to do with the situation. So all kinds of things like that can happen that really, and we all have different triggers. And so I was thinking about this, about my own triggers, and I'll be honest with you, I've got a whole busload of them. I don't know about you guys, but most people have more than one. So how do we deal with that? So years ago, I trained with a man named Dr. Thompson, who worked with police officers who had to, their job was to, obviously there were times when they had to arrest people that didn't want to be arrested. And so he came up with this, idea, this way of dealing with some of our triggers. One of my personal ones was when my daughter was like a young teen and she would roll her eyes at me. I don't know if that's a trigger for anyone else, but that was a trigger for me. That was one that would really set me off. But what I learned from him later, after she was a teen, unfortunately, what I learned from him was this little thing called know it, name it, own it. So the first step in all of these is bringing awareness to it and being aware that that this is a trigger for us, that we see ourselves getting angry when this happens. So once I was able to know what it was, then he instructed us that we needed to name it. And when he said name it, it really sounded silly, but it worked. So for me, it was, oh, here comes Miss Roll Her Eyes all the time. So whenever she would roll her eyes, I wouldn't say this to her like to her face, but inside my head, I was saying, oh, there's Miss Roll Her Eyes all the time. And when I did that, what that did was it gave me enough pause for me to hit that crossroads to own it and to make that crossroads decision. Am I going to act in a disturbed way, or am I going to take a more peaceful route? Am I going to work on on trying to build our relationship, or am I going to do something that's going to do more to destroy the relationship? So I would just encourage you that maybe this might work for you too. It worked for me. And like I said, I've got a whole busload of triggers, and some of them are very deep rooted from a very long time ago, back in childhood. But this is one that really has been helpful for me. So the next step I want to go to is this idea of automatic thoughts and the distortion of those thoughts. In the book that the college uses a lot, the Anger Management Source Book, they actually list 12 different automatic thoughts and the way that they're distorted. And I wanted to share 4 of them because these are things that we have probably all done. I know I've done every one of the 12. I've thought these things, and if you step back and look at it, you think to yourself, well, that really wasn't reasonable. But let's look at these 4 because I think they have a lot to do with our relationships, especially with our children, but they really deal with anybody. The first one is the irritation fixation. And this is when we focus on what is wrong or irritating to us. And sometimes it's just the one thing out of a much bigger picture. And really that's the antidote to it, is looking at the bigger picture. I'll give you an example. So I would have one of my kids, in fact, I should tell you this, I have 4 kids and I have 3 grandchildren. My kids are age 31 to 41, and we have 3 grandkids now. And I can just tell you that when the kids would come home and have a letter grade on their report card that was less than I thought it should be, it was hard for me to see all the rest of the grades. Has that ever happened to you? I didn't know it was called irritation fixation, but that's what it is. And so the antidote to that really is focusing on a much bigger picture and really asking ourselves, what else could I notice about this? What isn't wrong? What has gone well? What is the pleasant thing that's happened? What is here that we could enjoy? What could I do to motivate myself to compliment rather than to criticize? I mean, there's all kinds of questions that we can ask. And I think the one thing that helps us the most is just asking ourselves, what can I be grateful for if I wasn't going to take such a critical posture? That question of gratitude is so helpful that honestly, I find when I find myself getting irritated about something, just asking that question of what could I be grateful for in my whole situation and in this situation specifically. So the next one on this list of automatic thoughts and distortions is assuming. And there's 2 forms of assuming. One is mind reading and the other one is fortune telling. So mind reading is where we assume that we know what others are thinking without checking it out. So we've probably all done this too, especially with our kids, because we know already what they're thinking, don't we? Or maybe we don't. And I think as we go on today, we're going to see a few things that might help us to really appreciate the need to ask more questions and to listen more reflectively with them. But mind reading, once we've decided what someone else is thinking, makes it very difficult for us to see their point of view. And the second part of this is fortune telling. And this is where we are very pessimistically predict the negative outcome without testing the evidence of it. And so there's a lot of things that we do this in. We might do it from a personal basis. We might say to ourselves, if if I try to talk about why I'm angry, I'll lose control and look like an idiot. If I express my anger, I'll explode. I'll become violent and maybe hit my kids just like my dad did to me. Those are fortune telling. And what's the real? So the question is what's real here? And what's the antidote for that is, why might this negative thing not happen? Sometimes good things do happen. And just looking at that, and I see someone just made a comment about catastrophizing, and that's absolutely right. And that's another one of those automatic thoughts that happen where we make something wrong and bigger than it really is. So making assumptions about what other people are thinking or what they might do, especially our children, can be a difficult way of maintaining and managing our anger. This next one is pretty interesting too. This is all about shoulding, and we do a lot of that. We do a lot of shoulding on ourselves, making demands of ourselves and sometimes of other people that may or may not be reasonable. Most of the time, they're very rigid demands. You know, I should have done better. And sometimes this is what comes up for those of us that have that think about the fear of not being good enough, or not being a good enough parent, or not being the fear of failing and whatnot. And we look at it and say, you know, I should have done this, or I shouldn't do this, or I should do this. And we do the same thing with other people too, right? We'll say, well, he should have known better. He should have done better. He should have acted this way. So one of the ways that we can overcome that is by replacing the word should with the word would or could. So maybe instead, if we said, it would be nice if, and then complete the sentence, right? It would be better if and then complete the sentence. Anytime we have that word should in there, it's just a danger signal that we've got an expectation that might be a little rigid, or might be a little bigger than what is actually possible. That little girl I told you about that was 7 years old, and I thought she was 11, you know, I was thinking in my mind, she should be acting better, right? She's 11 years old, I'm pretty sure. And then I find out she's not at all. So really examining that. And then finally, we're going to just make a couple of comments on this thought of a labeling. Labeling is, again, one of those things that we do both to ourselves and we do to others. And much of the time, the labels that we put on ourselves were actually given to us somewhere in the past. So without going into my story too deep, I do that in other sessions, but you know, if I had a difficult childhood, let's just say that, and I had a label put on me that I was stupid, that I didn't think enough. And so later in life, and even today, I will say that if you know, I'll find myself saying, why are you so stupid that you can't do this? Or why didn't you think about that? And so sometimes we label ourselves, and that can be a trigger for us to be angry. So the danger is that we label other people, especially our children. And when I talk about labeling, it's not just those things that we think are bad, you know. Sometimes we'll hear a parent say, why are you being so stubborn? And so what we're doing at that point is labeling a child as stubborn. And that it's something that's going to stick with them for a very long time. My experience with the word stupid started when I was 5 years old. And today I'm over 65, and I can tell you that it's still something that sticks with me. So it's just one of those things. And labeling isn't just about the bad things, you know. We have to be really careful about labeling even other things, like saying, you're so smart, or you know, you're so pretty, or you're so whatever. Because again, that's a label that can really play on someone's personality and the things that they're willing to do and not willing to do later in life. So those automatic thoughts can all be checked, and it's something that is a real good idea. So, wow. I don't know where we are in our time, but these are the questions that I was asked, and I'm going to share them with you. And what we're going to do with these questions is we're going to divide you up into groups, put you into breakout rooms if I can figure out how to do it here. And I may have
You
to.
can do it.
I'm sorry?
You can do it.
I can do it. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
you
going to stop
can do
the
it.
share on this.
It's
screen.
1:40 now, just so you know, Joe.
Yeah, I'm working hard here. Emotional space and strategies for downtime. That was the biggest question I got. What to do when you are at your wit's end, alternatives to yelling and frustration, and what to do when kids are angry. I would love to hear what some of you are thinking about this. So I'm going to stop this share right here. I'm going to open up breakout rooms. I'm going to create the rooms. Each one of you will go into a room, and let's say, please choose one person to be your spokesperson. And I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes. Pick one of those subjects. And let's see if we can come up with some ideas of how to deal with that. So we're
Hello?
We're back.
Is everybody back?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope. So, Sonia, let's mute everybody. Thank you. We have 5 more seconds before all the rooms are closed. There we go. So I hope everybody had some nice conversations. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, that this is the first time I've done a webinar like this. And I think I should have started with this communication, because it would have been really great for you guys to spend more time at that. And I'm afraid that we are going to run out of time and so I'm going to hold off on having the sharing done from you, because I have a few strategies that I would like to share with you and around this subject. So the very first question that came up was about emotional space and strategies for downtime. We're in a tough situation right now where some of us live in small houses. We've got our kids home all day. We're at home, we're trying to work. Maybe our partner is there too. And we have all kinds of things going on for us. And the very things that kids need the most, they're missing. And that is things like routine and the structure that they're used to. They're all new things that are coming at them. And those are the things that they're accustomed to and that they need. And so for us to be successful in creating this space that we need, both emotional space, physical space, or whatever, comes down to doing something that in the coaching world we call designing the relationship. I'm going to call it designing the day. And in designing the day, you know, when the kids are in school, a lot of times they'll have, even in middle school and high school, they're doing this a little bit more now. They have a community circle at the beginning of the day. And in some schools, like I've seen some examples out west, where some of the schools actually start their day with this question, and I love it. The question that they ask is, you know, how are you feeling this morning? and how ready are you for school? And on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you? And so they ask that question, and the kids are able to say, well, I'm a 1 today because, you know, my cat died, or I'm a 4, or I'm a 5, and the teacher is involved in that too. So I think that designing that relationship by having a more kind of a morning meeting where you just gather everyone up and you decide, you communicate together, how is our day going to look today? What are the things that we would like to do? What are the things that we need to do? And let's just decide how that's going to be done, and let's lay the day out together, not unilaterally just mom or dad telling the kids what's going to happen that day. I think it's really important to include them in on that because, you know, kids need to feel like they belong to a team and that they have that structure. And if you can help them to create that structure, you're going to get a lot more buy-in. The second part of that is, you know, you may say, well, I'm scheduling my day. And of course you have to be flexible with all of this. And you might say, well, from 9 to 10, we're going to do this, or 10 to 10:30, we're going to do that. So we do have to have some flexibility, but at the same time, kids don't typically tell time by looking at the clock and saying, oh, it's 10 o'clock, it's time for art, or, you know, that's not how that works. But their day is structured by actual events. So, you know, even at the beginning of the day, even with young children, maybe 6, 7 years old, 5 years old, I think you could do it this young. You could have them draw a picture of them doing art, and then place that in the stream of time. You have you have them see when and choose maybe when they're going to do their homework. You know, we're all different, and this communication has to be a two-way street. So the parents need to say, listen, today is a pretty difficult day for me, and I'm feeling like a 3, and I'm thinking that I need time to do my work, and so I need some quiet time. And so we build that in, and we agree as a family that during this time we're going to do this, and during this time we're going to do that, and give ourselves some time to really design what we're doing. We're going to mix into that responsibilities that are necessary. We're going to mix in fun time because the kids need that, right? And we need it too. So we're designing a schedule, and we're helping the kids to kind of see how things are going to be laid out. And it may not be by clock, it may be by creating events. I think that is kind of the overall look at it. There's a lot more detail, I think, that we could share with that, but I want to also have the opportunity to look at some of these other questions that came up. So communication is really important, and designing the day ahead of time is key to that. Let's see, I was trying to, there we go. Is that the next question? What to do? Yeah, what to do when you're at your wit's end. Okay, so I'm almost out of time. Be prepared because unexpected things are going to happen. Managing your self-talk, using relaxation techniques. We all know these things, but we just need to remind ourselves that if in fact we feel as if we're getting too angry, it might be time just to separate ourselves at all, as possible as that might be. The alternatives to yelling, don't overreact or take it personally. Listen, hear what they say, seek to understand. And the way we do that is by asking them questions, like just saying to them, you know, I'm noticing that you're pretty angry right now. What's up? So speak to me calmly, but tell me what's happening. And then listen very, very carefully to what's happening, because this listening part is the hardest part for all of us. After we've listened and we've heard their point of view and we're trying to understand, then we can define our point of view and collaborate together on a solution. Anytime we can have a bilateral solution or a collaborative solution, we're always going to have better results with our kids. And in dealing with our kids who get angry, you know, we don't want to get into a power struggle with a kid. You're just never going to win that one. And you really sharing that power, companioning them, that's a whole nother subject we could spend 2 or 3 hours on, but really just, it's about asking questions and listening, not grilling them, but drilling them. And of course, like we said previously, not taking things personally. It's not about them being against you. So, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start. Sonia, I feel like we need to do this again and start where we, you know, in that middle part where we had all the different things, because there's a lot we can do to maintain our own peacefulness, and at the same time be teaching our children how to make good moral decisions. So if anyone has questions, I'm always open to them. Number one. Number two, I have a lot of handouts that I would be happy to provide. If anyone has one specifically that they'd like to see, I would be happy to share that with them. And I think I've run out of time.
Well, Joe, thank you so much. On behalf of everyone that's with us today, we want to thank you for your time and your thoughtfulness in putting this presentation together. And it is a lot of information to share, so we appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, but we can stick around for a few minutes for questions, and we will be sending out the recording to everyone. And